Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose, Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline Magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning's newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual business sector and their own individual businesses, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I introduce them, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, the rather excellent property and planning experts, Evans Jones, and they've taken over the banner at the back here. And also, we'll also be getting free bottles of cold water to go with it as well. Anyway, welcome to the show. Let me introduce you to the guys. Today we've got Rob Lister, Managing Director of Lister Unified Communications, and Rob is actually celebrating 20 years in business. So congratulations, Rob. I'm sure we'll have a chat about that in a minute. We've got Heather Forbes, Head of Archive Services of Gloucestershire County Council. It's been 16 years in the job. She's Vice Chairman of Gloucester History Festival as well. We've got Chris Price, Chairman, Director, President, El Capitano of Pact Property and Assets Limited, and he's also a Director of Hawthorne House Nursing Home as well. So welcome, guys. And finally, and not least, standing in for Phil Vickery, a very own super sub himself and super newspaper man. He's come off the bed to kick around a few stories. He's going to throw a few things around and score the headlines. It's got to be our own business expert, Ian Mean. Welcome, guys, to Punchline.
Hi, great to be here, even as a substitute.
Always, Ian. Let's just quickly rattle through the headlines, shall we? So it's a real mixed bag today. None of the big sheets, broad sheets or newspapers with red tops have got a particular theme. It's everything really. So we've got UEFA threat over Euro finals. It's the main leading in the Times. The Daily Telegraph swaps school COVID tests as Oxford professor. Could we be free by July, says the Daily Mail. The Guardian, ministers admit shame over rape conviction rates and pledge reform. Terrible story that. We got the Daily Express, 9 missed chances cost 22 lives. The Daily Mirror, they focus on the football, but again, they go on about the Manchester bombings. They were failed. The Sun, it's all about the football. And really what I love about the Sun, well, maybe someone's picked it out, but even Wally the Walrus is back for the big game. Apparently he came from the Scilly Isles. And my favorite at the moment, I keep going on about it, is the Daily Star. Your tin hat can't fool them. Yuri Gagarin. Not many people know who he is, but I know that Ian Mean will. Anyway, Ian, what have you picked out for us today, please?
Well, Mark, there's one story around today, and that's football. And I dare say we'll have some predictions later. My prediction is 3-1 to England.
Okay.
And you talked about the Sun. True to football's coming home. This is Wally the Walrus, who apparently has been seen in the Scilly Isles. He's coming back to cheer on the team. Happy, funny, and it's what we all want today. In terms of other stories, 2 other things caught my eye. The absolutely shocking story of the Manchester Arena. I think the Daily Mirror do that well today, and their headline, they were failed. And what the catastrophic issue here to me seems to be lots of people just did not do their jobs. You know, police went off for a kebab break for a few hours. Security was non-existent. So that's a good story. And my old paper, the Daily Mail. Now, could we be free on July 5th? While I support the Mail, it's a great journalistic paper. I actually don't agree with this. Their campaign is to actually get everything back more quickly. While I agree business needs that, it shouldn't be at the cost of health. Personally, I don't think this is going to happen. I think the virus is surging, and yes, it's now a race between vaccination and virus, and the big worry is young people now being infected.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I've been talking to a lot of hoteliers, lots of people in the restaurant trade, and what they're saying is that older people who've been jabbed up aren't wearing their face masks. They're not being very conscious of the younger people who are actually serving them who haven't been jabbed up. And that seems to be a running theme, really irresponsible and really quite unfair. You know,
Totally.
Unfortunately, we have people in society who are bloody selfish. Let's be honest about it. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that, Ian. We'll go over to Rob. Rob, what have you picked out for us, please, mate?
The first story following the football, I don't know if we can see that, again, to a degree, is about England drink from Coke's corporate cup. I just think on a slightly wider context as a business, you know, a business and business, its link with sport, you know, it does raise a lot of questions, doesn't it, with the sort of gesture politics that's going on at the moment. And what is his name, Ronaldo refusing to drink his Coke and removing it, and Pogba removing the Heineken, and even what was her name, Naomi Osaka being unable to do her, you know, press releases due to sort of mental health issues. You know, all serious and all have a yin on one side, but there is a yang on the other side of it, isn't there? And as a business person and all of us in business who may be asked to and may get involved in sponsoring events, sports teams, community teams, whatever it may be, there has to be something going the other way. You know, there has to be something in it for the sponsors. And, you know, and there's been a historic way of, you know, a bit of press, a bit of support, a bit of this, but where the superstars are going to actually make their gesture of, you know, going against it, it leads to some questions, doesn't it? And, you know, what the answer is, you know, particularly when we're talking about mental health or physical health, you know, they're, but so is the wage check and the money that these guys get, largely on the back of, you know, sponsorship that's helping promote and put money into the coffers. So, well, I think it's just
if you talk about unusual drinks, then Rob, what about gambling? All the football clubs that have big gambling, you know, sites on their chest. Surely gambling is far more dangerous and corrupt than a soft drink.
I agree, but I mean, you know, with that yin and yang, you know, we all want something. You know, we can all find something wrong with everything, as well as always finding something right with everything, isn't it? And, you know, if the players want the money, they've got to understand there are some obligations that come with it. You know,
I think
so that was one of my stories. And the other one I had was again, if you can see that, fines for loud cockerels help feather councils' nests. Now, I thought maybe with Heather here as maybe pointing that now the, you know, councils are raising more fixed fines than the police are every year. It's, you know, they've gone from 6,000 in 1997 to over 6 million a day. And Heather, I just wanted to know if I could ask you, are there some really funny ones or ones that you could mention that, you know, Gloucestershire Council have issued that have come up in your time?
I'm afraid I can't think any off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. That's a very boring answer, but I will keep thinking as we're going on. If I come up with anything at the end, I will let you know.
Well, maybe you could, if you could delve into the archives afterwards and send something, and we'll definitely put it as a footnote to the show, if you like, Heather, if you'd like to do something like that.
I can definitely do that.
That leads very nicely. Thanks ever so much, Rob. That leads me very nicely to you, Heather. What a great link, Rob. Thanks very much. So, Heather, what have you picked out for us today, please?
Well, the one that interests me personally as a very keen cyclist is the global bike shortage set to continue, which is there. I'm not sure if you can see that in the Guardian on page 34. And I was interested because it also appeared in the Times. And what interested me as an archivist was the fact that the figures in the growth of sales was sort of completely different in both newspapers. So in terms of evidence and so on, it was quite an interesting point. But I just feel that cycling has just been so good during the pandemic. It's been a really good way to get out and see brilliant Gloucestershire, because it's a fantastic place, and keep fit and so on. So I really liked that one, but as I say, I couldn't help looking at it with my archivist hat on as well. And the other one that I was particularly interested in was the debate about workers returning to the office, but I think someone else is keen to talk about that, so I won't say too much.
They don't have to steal your thunder. They're behind you, Heather. So take your story while you have the chance.
Yeah,
and football.
And it's interesting with that one because that's very much a debate in the county council, and it's, you know, it's going to be harder to refuse flexible working requests, but should we also be coming back to support the businesses in the city, as well as all of the issues of are we going to be spreading more virus and so on? So that one is a really high up the agenda from our point of view.
And what's your view? What would you personally like to do? Do you think they should go back to the office?
Well, from an archivist point of view, again, we have to come into the office because we can't deal with unique and irreplaceable archives in our personal homes. We also run a public service, so we can't do that from home either. But I do think there are jobs that can be done from home, and I think it's sensible to do that because it allows people such as working mothers or people who are carers to fit their other responsibilities around writing reports and things like that. So I really do favour a flexible approach.
And I would just like to add, I think the Gloucestershire County Council and all the district councils as well, have done an absolutely amazing job during this COVID period. I really do think so. They're kind of unsung heroes. We do talk about the NHS, we do talk about the fire and the police, but I do think our councils, we can actually be pretty proud of them, the way they've operated themselves under very, very tough times. Thanks ever so much for that.
Thank you.
Let me go to Chris. Hiya, Chris. Great to have you on the show at long last. Punchline Talks. We've had your namesake, Chris, the other Chris Price from Tainton. So it's far, you know, better to get the other A team on, shall we say? Chris, what have you picked out from us from the papers?
Well, it's a nice link to what Heather was talking about, actually, in the cyclists. In the Times, there's a small article at the bottom about a court backing priority for cyclists over cars in new road schemes. So it's a pretty nice link there, I think, Heather. And really, what I wanted to talk about was this article. It says Johnson trying to jolt commuters back to work, with Terminus Day being the 19th of July. An interesting article, that, because yesterday there was a lot in the press generally about the moratorium on commercial rent arrears being delayed until March next year. And I was speaking to an insolvency practitioner, Neil Maddox, in Bristol yesterday, and he thinks it's the government actually passing the cost of looking after the tenants onto the commercial landlords. And I know a lot of commercial landlords are now feeling as though they're almost victimized because they have tenants in their properties who aren't paying any rent, and they can take no action now for a further 9 months. So it will have been, by the end of it, a good 18 months where unscrupulous tenants will have been in a situation where they are able to avoid any rent payments. And if the company then becomes insolvent, say in February or March next year, the landlord will not have had any rent at all for the whole of that period. And that's an interesting sort of social or a mix, really, because why should one particular sector, i.e. the commercial landlord, be picked on to that extent? I think it's an interesting discussion, perhaps a political play, in that there aren't that many commercial landlords and there are many tenants. Who would know? But yeah, it's a problem.
Now, it's quite funny, actually. The other part I've got here, I picked this out from the business section of the Times. You'll be in the office by autumn, the bank tells its staff. Now, this is the Bank of America, and it wants all its staff going back. Now, obviously, you deal in the commercial property sector as well. What's your kind of, drumbeat?
I think it's a real mixed picture, Mark, to be perfectly honest. Some firms are encouraging them back. I mean, my son works for BNP in London, and they are encouraging people back. But also, they're very careful with the social distancing in the office. So you have this conflict about wanting to get everybody back, but how do you sit them? Do you sit them back to back? Do you have screens in between everybody? How much room have you got to give? So while you might be getting some people back, if you have to give more room, how do you accommodate everybody that was once in that building with new social distancing being put in place? So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. Generally, the consensus is that teams will be coming back at set times. So there'll be a return to work for maybe 2 or 3 days with A, B, and C teams, that sort of thing, coming in as teams to occupy the space and then be cleaned afterwards before the next team might come in again.
Bit like they run the manufacturing and building sites were doing the same type of thing, wasn't it?
I think so. I don't know what Heather thinks of seeing the council in respect of that, or what the plans are there, perhaps.
Do you know, Heather?
Certainly, as far as the council's concerned, the encouragement is that people work from home where they can. But we have got all the desks a long distance apart from each other with regular cleaning and all of that sort of thing. And there are some adaptations being made so that more people can fit in safely rather than sitting very close to each other. So that's where we're going on that one.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I'm going to stay with you actually, Chris, if you don't mind, because you're an insolvency expert as well. Can you tell us what the overall picture is looking like? Because especially in the hospitality trade, I hear through the grapevine, a lot of these companies are running out of cash.
I think they are, and certainly the feedback is that there are problems down the line. But at the moment, the rate of insolvencies is very, very low. And I think that's because of furlough schemes, HMRC schemes, deferring payments of VAT, rates relief has meant that many, many businesses have struggled on. But the big problem for all the hospitality sector is they cannot operate at 50% capacity. They cannot make a profit at 50%. I mean, if your margin is maybe 20%, if you're looking for that sort of profit, you've got to get to 80% occupancy of the buildings, of the venues. To actually make any money. Otherwise, they will at best be only breaking even. And actually, there's an interesting article in the Times, again, there's a good link there this morning about how festivals and WOMAD are going to be in real trouble if they can't open up again this summer, because the cash will eventually, and the bills, some of these bills have not gone away. They're still there, but they've just been deferred for another day. So, but it would be a shame, wouldn't it, to lose our English countryside summer festivals.
Without a shadow of a doubt, and of course, Gloucestershire and Cheltenham in particular is famous for its festivals, there's a lot of companies behind the scenes. The lighting people, the people that deal with the sounds, the stage, the actors, all these kind of people won't have jobs if we're not careful. We could lose a whole generation of culture if we're not careful. What else is happening in your field at the moment, then, Chris?
As I say, it's the general the markets are very quiet at the moment. I think uncertainty in the commercial property market is rife. Nobody quite knows where it's going to go. I mean, there's indicators out there. There's a bit of a fear, I think, of inflation, and inflation perhaps down the line leading to increases in interest rates and how that will affect businesses going forward. But I think everything's on hold. If I'd be perfectly honest, I think a lot of things are just on hold at the moment. Everybody waiting to see what happens in the next 6 to 9 months.
Okay, thanks very much. And that brings me perfectly as a great link over to Rob, obviously, because he runs a communications company, and putting people on hold is part of the business, I suppose. There, Rob. Rob, you've been going, Lister's been going 20 years, and congratulations, by the way. I know you worked really, really hard behind the scenes. What's been the fundamental biggest change that you've seen in your sector?
The whole technology industry has changed extraordinarily from 20 years ago to where we are today. From analog phone lines and analog phone services and big old brick Nokia phones that we had, and I guess some of you may have even had the big old battery packed ones you shoved in your car or something like that. To where we are today, which is the smartphone, isn't it? We've all got a smartphone. We all run our lives on it. We run our banking, our photography, our music, our social life, and a little bit of work from time to time on those devices as well. And I always laugh with my kids. The thought of walking around with 500 quid in your pocket and the gateway to your whole life is quite literally absurd in many parts of my mind. I've never had that type of cash, or would even contemplate carrying it in my wallet today. Yet I carry that phone with total abandon. So I think we've seen this huge rise into that, and into cloud telephony, cloud computing, all on the back of ever faster growing internet access. I mean, those of you who can remember those old dial-up analog modems that squealed when you connected, and getting 20 kilobits per second download. I'm sure you guys in the press, when you first started, trying to get articles over the internet, it was taking, you could have driven them to London quicker than you could probably download them on the internet. To now incredibly fast broadband, you know, gigabit speeds. It's just extraordinary, isn't it? What internet access speeds have done to allow us to do so much. And, you know, the last 12 months has accelerated that a lot with, you know, calls like this, you know, video calls. Video calls are becoming a standard part of our lives. And we're all actually all right on Zoom, on Teams, on, you know, on Collaborate, on the various different, you know, and then the WhatsApp and mobile apps. Just, yeah, the shift has been tremendous from that reluctance. You know, I always love, my mother-in-law gets terrified still that she's been on the phone for too long and she hangs up after 30 seconds. I must go now, you know, to the thought that now every single call is effectively free or bundled into a fixed package that it is today. And we've got not only voice, but we've got this whole picture thing going on with it and content sharing. So yeah, dramatic changes over 20 years, adds a technology.
And it's a bit like, isn't it? It's a bit like Star Trek. You know, watch an old episode of Star Trek with Captain Kirk and he'd flip the phone and beam him up. And it's like that, and you could see each other. It's amazing.
Tremendous foresight from those guys, wasn't it?
Brilliant. And I've just bought myself an Apple iPod.
Very good.
And I absolutely bloody love it, to be honest with you. Absolutely love it. Thanks ever so much, Rob. I know it's
seeing a lot of problem. I mean, getting a lot of feedback and talking about all Zoom calls is the training of youngsters. If you're trying to train youngsters in your particular business, that's very, very difficult to do remotely. You need to be with people. They need to be able to just feed off the water cooler moment when you're just stood around chatting about something. I think that is really missed with the youngsters. And probably that's the biggest area of problem.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that'll be one of the drivers, getting people back into the offices in some scale and format.
Well, that is a great link over to Ian, obviously, as well, because he's a champion of The Apprentice, a champion of young people and work, Ian. And talking about young people and work, I'm going to quickly switch the phone, share the screen here, because I've got something. Oh, not that. That's my little script. Oh no, stop that one. I'm just going to share it again. It's this actually what I'm after. There we go. Ian, here you are with Muhammad Ali, mate, in the Daily Mail, the Birmingham Mail today.
Yeah, this was in sort of 1984 era, and when Rob was talking about changes there in technology, there's probably been no bigger change than in newspapers in my time. I was chief news editor of the Birmingham Mail from 75 to 84. And at the height of that, we were selling 350,000 copies a night, 12 editions, had 68 reporters. And, you know, this was a huge operation. No online. I remember during the Falklands War, we all huddled around the TV and I wrote the splash, you know, when the Whitehall somber chap talked about a ship being lost. I literally hammered it out a paragraph at a time. My wife took that down. Judy is now my wife, and we were printing literally within 20 minutes. So although hot metal and that sort of old style journalism is now outdated, it was extremely quick. What we've now got is a total online operation, and the Birmingham Mail from those days of selling that sort of amount of copies a night is now down to around 22,000. I don't blame the industry. It's moved with revenue, frankly. And latterly, when I've edited papers like the Western Daily Press, we've had to accept online as a very, you know, it's a large component, but online has not laid the golden eggs that newspaper owners like Murdoch hoped it would. It's great for various things like travel, ads, but it doesn't give you the revenues that print does. So I've always been an issues person. I believe in issues. Online, I'm afraid these days is what I call, a lot of it's clickbait. You can put a daft story online and everyone goes on it and follows it. I am perhaps very old-fashioned. I'm interested in young people, apprenticeships, veterans, care, basic things that affect all of us. So I always stuck to that mantra and still do. And I don't give up reading papers. I bought all the papers this morning, as I do most mornings. Costs something like £9.80. Papers are expensive these days. On a Saturday, the FT is nearly £4 now. So, you know, it's changed, like Chris's business, hugely. Has it improved like the technology that Chris has? I still believe we have the best press in the world. I'm an avowed Daily Mail trained reporter. Lots of people may not like the Daily Mail for its views. That never affected me as the news editor in Manchester or working in Northern Ireland or whatever. It's quite interesting, Mark, that the launch of GB News on Sunday, we probably looked at it and thought, God, this looks terrible. They're talking like in a jail. It was all black and dreary. But actually, if you read the papers today, you'll find that Andrew Neil's GB is getting a lot of support from what might be called the right-wing newspapers, Daily Mail, Times. And it's interesting here that just looking at the Times story today on it, headline is GB News Chief turns tables by threatening to ban advertisers. You've probably known in the last few days, IKEA and people have said, oh, we're going to withdraw our ads because this is a right-wing operation. Now, this is very serious to me. And what's great is that almost the opposition, I mean, Murdoch has influence in radio and TV, is supporting it. So we've gone through massive, massive change. I started in this business when I was 17. And my mentor, my first editor, was Ian Mackenzie, who is actually the father of Kelvin Mackenzie. Some might say the most infamous editor over the last 50 years as editor of The Sun. I've never lost that. And what I found in Gloucestershire, I just tried to make a difference, whether it be in local issues or in health particularly, which I'm interested in.
And Ian, I know you've always been a big backer of Punchline as well, and thanks for that over the years as well. So, right, well that brings us very nicely over to Heather. Heather, thanks ever so much for joining us today. Heather, Gloucestershire Archives, can you tell us a little about it, please? And how does the business community connect to Gloucestershire Archives, and why is it so important?
Thank you. Gloucestershire Archives is a department of the County Council, as we've alluded to earlier, but I run it very much like a business. And I see our mission to be the sort of corporate and community memory for Gloucestershire and South Gloucestershire. So in terms of how that fits with the business and the business communities, we actually hold a lot of business records here. So for example, we just finished cataloguing the records of the Doughty Company, which is one of the biggest collections we've got here. So that will be made available to the public. And part of the reason why I got in touch, or Mark and I got in touch, is in relation to documenting the pandemic. So I was really delighted at looking at how Punchline over the last 18 months has actually really given a good indication of how the pandemic has affected Gloucestershire, and I asked for permission to keep that in the archive. So the sort of thing that I'm really keen to work with business owners on is, if you have records or documents or anything that you think ought to be in the history of the county for future generations, because we keep it forever once it's here, then I'd be really interested to hear from people. So that's fundamentally how Gloucestershire Archives works with businesses.
Now, last week we actually did a story about Gloucester Rugby, and you kindly sent me over a little brief about Gloucester Rugby. Can you just tell me about that, about what it was before 150 years ago that you said about?
Yeah. Yes. When I first came, I thought, what do we need to do for Gloucester? What sums up Gloucester? And Gloucester Rugby was one of the key things there. And they were also altering their premises at the time, prior to putting up their new one. And that's what linked into the punchline story this week about the new training suite and so on. So we've run a project since 2007 documenting the history of Gloucester Rugby and looking after their archives. And it's exactly 130 years this year since Gloucester Rugby first went to Castle Grim, which is the site in Kingsholm. So it's really quite appropriate in many ways that they are expanding exactly 130 years later. And again, if anyone wants to find out any more about that, all sorts of things. For example, there's a book here written by Malk King, who is one of the volunteers who's been doing all of that work. And in it are lots of documents relating to the history of that particular site and why, and the history of Kingsholm fundamentally. And the other thing that's quite nice at the moment is that that group of volunteers that started in 2007 have clocked up 55,000 hours on that project. And we're going to have a tea party when things open up to celebrate that achievement.
Wow.
So that sort of fits in with that story in Punchline this week.
And I'd like to say, Heather, I'm immensely proud of my team. It's a very small team. I'm immensely proud that you phoned me up and asked that, that our work could be documented for history. That really, well, you will not believe what that meant to me and the rest of the team. So thank you ever so much for that. And that is a very nice link to quickly go through what's caught your eye in this week's Punchline. So I'm going to start with you, Rob. Rob, what's caught your eye this week, please, sir?
Yeah, lots and lots of things, but the one, my local neighbours, Godsall's Cheese. The artisan cheesemakers from Leonard Stanley. I know the stories about World Refill Day, and you can go and take to reduce plastics and help the environment, take your milk bottles there and refill them from they're direct from the farm, which is a great idea. But just as important, if you get a chance, go down and buy some of their cheese. Simply outstanding food.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Rob. Chris, what's caught your eye in this week's Punchline?
Well, I did all three papers, actually, the Times, but more importantly, in the Australian News and Journal at the bottom, it's about the nuclear fusion plant at Berkeley. The idea of having our very own sun in Gloucestershire, I think, is actually quite appealing and is a great technology issue. Well, they may be 20 years away, and I don't think they've managed to produce more electricity out of a fusion plant yet than they've put in, but, here's hoping.
No, that's great. We ran that story as well. No, thanks very much there, Chris. Ian, what's caught your eye in this week's Punchline, please?
Just what Chris is saying, obviously we've been Business West a part of the operation that has been doing that bid. And obviously we're now through to the next stage. And as Chris said, this is an enormous project. And what interests me is that this is taking place, hopefully, in what was an amazing place for some of the world's top scientists. That's nuclear scientists in Berkeley and Albury. We have enormous talent in EDF in this area as well. There are 15 bids in total. We'll know in the next year the final situation, and probably in the next couple of months where that's going. What sort of caught my eye this week is you ran a story about hospitality and whatever. Hospitality is on its knees. What we're finding now is a bit of a double whammy. We've got Brexit, where we've had lots of people who've been working in our hotels and pubs who've returned to Europe. And we've got this absolutely terrible shortage. It's a major, major problem. And as a county that has a very large hospitality sector, we need to do something about it. We used to have a sort of cookery school at Gloucester College. in Cheltenham. We haven't got that anymore. So what I fear is happening here is that after furlough, we're going to have some real difficulties towards the end of the year, particularly for young people coming out of college and university. A lot of older people as well in their 50s are going to find themselves without jobs. I've got a meeting later today with the Cheltenham task force, and it's all about skills, but we have to retrain people. You know, it is no good just thinking all about young people. There are many, many people with great skills from some of our great companies who are going to find themselves without work. So a proper retraining program is going to be important, and a real program of apprenticeships, which are really on a cliff edge now.
No, I totally agree with you. And do you know that apparently there's a shortage of people to work in abattoirs and in chicken factories and things like this because the Eastern Europeans aren't here.
Yeah.
Who can normally do that job, and they're saying in 3 weeks' time there's going to be a real crisis at our farmers when the abattoirs can't start kicking back to the farmers and say we can't take any more cows, we can't take any more of your chickens to slaughter because we don't have the
farming is a huge part of our Gloucestershire economy.
No, that's right. I've got to stop you there because we're running out of time. Very, very quickly, I had as well the new multi-million-pound training facilities and hospitality centre in Kingsholm. The fusion plans for fusion, I thought, but the big story for me this week, because those two are really, really important, was the preferred option for the M5 Junction 10. That to me is the missing piece of the jigsaw that will link to the cyber park for Cheltenham, and that will be absolutely huge for all of us. And I would also like to point out Randall and Payne also bought Gloucester accountancy firm Little & Co. That came from nowhere and increased their staff by 64 staff as well. So congratulations to Randall and Payne as well. They're nice guys, nice set of accountants. I'd just quickly like to thank our sponsors, Evans Jones, and all my panel today. Thank you very much for joining Punchline Talks. Bye.
Thank you.